right, welcome back to the Rental Journal. We're coming to you live from the American Rental Association's 2026 show in Orlando, Florida. And today's conversation is one I've been genuinely excited for a long time because my guest today isn't just watching the rental industry evolve, he's shaping the leaders inside of it and has been for decades. He's been facilitating peer groups since the 1990s and started his first peer group back in 2001. He's helped shape owners through growth, succession exits, and the messy middle, all in between. He's personally been involved with more than 20 acquisitions and sales of privately held businesses. He served as a CEO, COO, CFO, and VP of sales, which means he doesn't just talk leadership, he's lived in every single seat at the table and somehow been speaking at gigs, peer group meetings, and industry travels for a very long time. And he still finds time to play Tony Hawk Pro Skater on the original console like it's the 1990s. Today's guest hasn't just been doing sales pitches. It's not just a consulting lecture. It's revealing the true nature of business behind the curtain and the conversations about leadership, peer learning, and what actually separates good rental businesses from great ones. Dan, thank you and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate being here.
Dan, before peer executive groups was even a concept, before peer groups really became a part of your life, who was Dan Crowley? You left Albridge College with an accounting and business degree. What do you think your career looked like back then? What did you aspire to be to who Dan is today?
Well, you know, much like young people who go into the military right out of college or right out of high school, I had the unique opportunity to get drafted by Arthur Andersen, which is a global CPA firm. They were the biggest CPA firm, and they had a significant consulting arm. And so I just got thrown into a world of 70-hour work weeks and sweatshops, and I was coding. So I didn't have any idea what technology was or anything like that, but they teach you how to program. So I was programming and was a lead analyst for a while. And so that really was formative when you're 21 years old and you're like learning how to work hard. So that was probably, I would say, the first thing that really impacted me. And then from there, as I left that environment, I took with me that hard work ethic and I really focused on what did I want to do? How do I follow my dalliance in terms of interests? And so that's where I got really entrepreneurial. Just started working in a lot of different creative ways, creating businesses, failing businesses, creating businesses, failing businesses, you know.
So you've always had a strong relationship with numbers?
Yep.
So is that because the numbers feel very objective and they tell the truth and potentially the truth that people don't want to hear?
Oh, absolutely. Like I found very quickly that even though I may not have been a great accounting student, there was something about statistics. Loved baseball. So, you know, I loved getting a baseball trading card and flipping it over and looking at the statistics on the back of the trading card. And that just became my thing, scorecards and trading card, you know, like statistics. So the first thing I think I got involved with related to that was a peer group for auto dealers. And they were like, yeah, we need you guys to create a composite of our financials. So we were young. There were probably 4 or 5 of us. And we had to create these composite books of profit and loss statements and balance sheets. And it was like, oh, this is good and this is not good. So you need to improve, and then we like slowly learned what they needed to do to improve. But that was really the beginning. I would say, you know, from there, everything from business valuations and exit strategies around, you know, where do you want to be when you leave, that kind of thing. So there was a lot of that going on. So I was really into numbers and everything numbers told you.
So you were the original Moneyball before Billy Beane.
Oh my gosh, when that book came out, I was loving it. I was like, oh my gosh, this is like our thing, you know? So we had a blast watching that particular movie and reading the book, and absolutely that was it.
I want you to take me back to a very specific moment that you shared with me, that when we caught up just before our episode, you were 24 years old. flying solo to Las Vegas.
Oh, yeah.
You had to present to a General Motors roundtable. You walked into a full wine cellar of owners and something clicks. Talk us through this moment. What did you notice in that room that excited you and gave you a direction to where you are now?
Well, I love that you remembered that story because I don't think my kids even remember. I try to teach my son. But, man, that was it for me because going into that hot seat with 12 auto dealers representing their different geo territories around the country. And basically they were listening to me. So that was probably the number one thing was all of a sudden I realized like, oh, I'm up in front of them and they're listening to me. So you better have something important to say. So that was number one was I had never been in a situation like that. Number two, that gave me the confidence to recognize that when it came to fixed operations and understanding things like employee productivity and technician excellence and productivity and all those things related to auto service as well as in this case collision repair, I was like on it. I like had it. So I was like, this is it. This is going to be my thing. And I did. I ran with it for quite some time. Probably at that point, I stayed with it for 5-6 years on the automotive side. I actually went on to acquire and build body shops. So I was very much in the car world, and I love that. So, that was an early first phase for me.
So did you realize at the time that you were basically looking at the foundation of what would become your life's work? Or did it just feel like one of those, wow, that was cool moments?
Yeah. Well, we always call it a side hustle, right? So it's like, it's a side hustle. In fact, I don't remember actually making money at it till about 5 years ago. So we were always including it like, oh, well, you're a consulting client of mine. Let's do a peer group for you. And, they would cover my expenses and I'd run these peer groups. And, but yeah, it was just something I enjoyed. A lot of positive feedback. So people would get so much out of shared experience. Like from the very earliest stages, I felt like a teacher. Like, how teachers feel good about their vocation. And so that was it for me. It was like, facilitating peer groups, operating peer groups, that could be it for me. That could be what I want to do. So it took a while, but I also say to everybody I know, follow what you love because the money will eventually find you. Like don't ever make it be about the P&L and the balance sheet all the time. Make it be your vision, what you're seeing, and do what you enjoy because that's the majority of your time. You're not typically spending your time counting money. So that's number one. But yeah, that would be the lesson out of that.
But that really is a key pivot, right? Most people in your finance background, they stay in analytics, consulting, or a corporate life.
Correct.
You didn't. You chose the human side of leadership in peer groups instead of the numbers. At what point did you realize that the spreadsheets don't actually fix what holds most owners back?
Yeah. So that's a great question. Appreciate that, Michael. I would say, when we did the composite books and went over financials, very quickly it became about creating action items to improve or to fix things. And so when a business owner is faced with the stark reality of the real numbers in front of them, it does give you a little bit of an opportunity to convince them that maybe this is something I should look at and start working on. And that becomes the action item or the project or whatever it might be to improve the data in their business and ultimately make their lives better because financially it would be improving their lifestyle. So, but that was it. It was this idea of, oh, okay, we can't just do the math and show them the numbers. We have to create an environment where they can learn and grow. And that was ultimately learning from others in the peer group experience.
Yeah, because you've been really open about the fact that not everything worked perfectly along the way.
Oh, yeah.
When setting up peer groups, it's been an evolution of learning curve, not only for people in the peer group, but for you building the peer groups.
Yes.
So what's a failure or early or even mid-career experience that you've had that has really fundamentally changed the way you lead, how you facilitate, and how you show up to facilitate these
Yes.
experiences for owners?
Yeah, I would. That's a really good question. Also, I would say it happens every day. So just like when you look at some of these success stories of people who've created brands and created different companies that have become successful, they certainly are littered with failures as they go along, trying different things. We like to talk about. In the book Traction, they say something to the effect of, 20 ideas, 19 of them are bad, right? But to get to the one, and we actually had a keynote speaker this morning at our event, and he was great. He shared the fact that a $10,000 mistake can lead to a $100,000 idea. So he was willing to make many, many, many $10,000 mistakes, which is probably the right number, because now that I think about my life, they were all about $10,000 small mistakes that you wasn't going to get the money back, but it was going to lead to something bigger. And one for me would be jumping on automating dashboards and metrics prior to it being a thing. So I was probably a little early in the process, and we had created a really clunky solution where our members would submit data, and then they would get reports back at the end of the quarter and see where their data was all over the country. Like I can look at my region and all that. And it was just a clunky thing, and we didn't really know what we were doing because we're not technology people. And so ultimately that was an issue. So that was that was a good failure moment, because it did lead us to a lot of big things going forward.
So considering those $10,000 mistakes, if you could sit down with that version of yourself prior to that mistake, or to that early version of Dan, and Dan who hadn't learnt those lessons yet, is there a certain sentence or piece of advice that you would give him?
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay to make mistakes. My son is working for me right now, and he really runs operations. And he made a decision kind of unilaterally to spend $15,000 last year on a piece of software related to event planning. And, he did his due diligence. He felt like it was the right thing to do, and he made the call to do it. And I went to sleep the next night, no problem, because I knew that I had made similar choices, and I was happy to see him step out in faith and make that risky move of spending some money to try to implement some change in the company that would be useful. And so it worked out in this case. It was a mistake, but at the same time, with that, he was able to find an alternative solution that wouldn't cost him 15 grand a year. It would cost him like $7 grand a year. But to his credit, he knew to look for something that I did not know what to look to. I did not know to look for. So I appreciated that in him taking that risk.
Dan, something that you and I talked about that really struck me is that peer groups don't work because the people are smarter. They work because the environment is smarter.
Oh, yeah.
How do you actually create a space where owners are willing to open up?
That is a great question. So there is a process we go through in every peer group meeting at the onset that every facilitator who runs the meeting for the 10 business owners, 10 rental owners in a room, walks through and says, hey, everybody, these are the bylaws in which we're meeting. So every group has its own bylaws. We have standards. We sign confidentiality agreements. You're never allowed to give advice. Never, no way, ever. You're only allowed to share your experience. So there's never a finger pointing saying, that's a dumb idea. There's never anything that says, you should do this. It's always, in my experience, I do this, and so forth. So we spend a lot of time inside peer groups training the business owner to make sure that they know where the guardrails are in the meeting. And what happens is everything expands. So everybody is now open. They're open to sharing their successes and their failures. They're willing to listen. So a $20 million operator will listen to a $2 million operator, because that $2 million operator is creative and has a genius marketing mindset, right? And the $2 million person wants to know, like, what do I need to do to get to 4 million? So
Mm.
you're seeing it go both ways. And we always kind of think about, if we have 25 peer groups with 10 owners in each group, there is a largest member in each group. What is keeping that largest member active in that group? Because people think of peer groups that you're going to learn up. You're going to learn from somebody bigger than you. And that's not the case. That's why it works. We have 25 largest members in each of the groups, right? And they're still going to their groups and meeting with their groups. And it's because they're learning from everybody, not necessarily people that are just larger than you.
You've described peer groups as almost a sequence
Yeah.
as well, from a welcoming environment, confidence and confidentiality, and then real transparency.
Yes.
Why are those aspects so important, and why does that order also matter so much?
That's a great point. And it is. It's this creating the environment first. There's certainly some education and, where you're a bit of a sponge and you're learning very rapidly. We call it drinking from a fire hose, trying to see how people are communicating. And then at the end of the day, there's transparency. And that's really the secret sauce. Because if someone has the same action item 18 months in a row, clearly they're not taking action, right? So especially if you've had shared experience and you've had facilitation and you've identified what to work on, it's just like joining a workout facility, right? You want to have a game plan. You don't want to just spend money on a membership. You want it to have a difference in your life and make yourself more healthy and active. And so it's the same thing with peer groups. You're joining peer groups so that you are going to take that step, which a lot of people are hesitant to take. So in one case, a great example is debt. So in the US, owners like to take on debt, right? And so people say, oh, debt's bad. I can't wait to pay off my house. Can't wait to do this. And what we do is we really teach them the value of money and their return on investment. So if you purchase assets and you rent them, what's your return on that asset? What's your return on the equity of being a business owner? Is the value of your company going up? So we're focusing on that. And by the way, all those have percentages. So if the cost of money is 5% and you're making 25 to 30%, you shouldn't really be too concerned about debt. The only reason you should be concerned about debt is if you don't have a vision for growth. And if you don't have a vision for growth, we say that's fine. Then let's not worry about taking on more debt this year. But if you have a vision for growing, we want to see you use debt because that's critical to fuel that growth.
I really like that rule that you shared, that there's no advice unless it's asked for, and it's only via shared experience.
Yeah.
What is the starting sentence, in my experience, been so powerful in the way it's been the foundation of what you guys do?
Yeah. So our tagline has always been shared experience brings individual results, individual success. And it's something, I don't even know, it just came off the top of our heads back in the, maybe 15 years ago. As you know, we're at 25 years now. And it's just stood the test of time. It's one of those things where if anybody's ever participated in a business group, like a forum or, a Christian business group, or they might be in a different setting like that, you learn quickly that they do create these types of safe approaches to each other. And in my experience is a big part of that. So in my experiences, we'd use it in our family now, Michael. So we're like, well, in my experience, honey, blah, 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 right? So we're constantly, instead of saying you should, or, that's a stupid idea, we try to say, well, in my experience, and it's a nice way to communicate.
So you basically banned the most two common phrases in business of you should do, and that's a stupid idea, right?
Yeah, those are bad. In fact, this is a great story. So we actually had a member guest. So you're a guest in the group until you get voted in after the meeting for your first meeting. And the individual was flying, doing great. Everybody loved that person. They were doing excellent. But one of the members had shared their experience and wanted some feedback. And he literally just dropped that line and he's like, well, that's a stupid idea. You should da 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 da. And I was like, okay, he's new, no problems. This he can live past this. And the reality was that they did not allow him in the group because he exhibited that behavior. So that was a thing they were concerned with. But
yeah, well, I'd say peer learning is so powerful, but peer accountability is when things actually change.
Mhm.
So how do you turn these great conversations into a real behavioral change when they go back to their business?
Yes. Yeah, I mean that's great. And so what we found with peer groups is, you got 10 event rental operators, or in your case, event hire or equipment hire operators. And really, it's not just about meeting in person. So we do 2 in-person meetings, but what we found to help them with accountability is to touch base more frequently. So with the dawn of texting, I mean, you guys in Australia, you've been using WhatsApp for a while and things like that. We just have caught on recently, last couple of years in the US. But yeah, we use group texting. We have group emails. We've established a monthly Teams call, which allows them to check in with each other. And so what happens is it's not just, hey, we'll see you in 6 months for the next meeting. Now it's kind of like, how are you progressing on your action items? So there's that kind of accountability. Or if someone is in need of refinancing certain things, or they're having some big activity happen in their business related to acquisition of certain equipment or selling their used equipment, those conversations can happen on a regular daily, day in, day out basis. So we have, the group texting for all of our groups, all 25 groups.
So you've obviously sat across the table and things like that with hundreds of business owners. But when someone says, Dan, my problem is sales, Dan, my problem is operations, or I don't understand debt, how do you actually diagnose what's going on? Or what are the most common false problems that owners have presented you?
That's a great point. So an awesome false problem that people like to present to us over and over again is we started to benchmark what good is. That's very dangerous. So we said, your earnings percentage should look like this. And once we started saying that, we also realized we were going to create a problem, because people will say, well, my earnings don't look like that. How do I make my earnings look like that? And so we're meeting with them. And then, when we're having that meeting, we're like, well, wait a second. That's for a pure hire play or a pure rental play. So if you're a pure rental play, this is what the data looks like. But guess what? Not everybody's the same. So we look at a thing we have now called the model, which looks at what you sell. So if you sell equipment, if you, selling new, selling used, selling supplies in retail, doing rental, what we try to do is we say, well, based on your model, this is what good looks like. Right. So, so we help them establish a game plan. All of our facilitators get trained on how to help the members. So the member is going to ask for help inside the group, but they also have us as a company to lean on to ask questions, and that comes with your membership. So
how do you specifically tell the difference between a people problem, a process problem, or a strategy problem?
Oh yeah, I mean that's the trick, right? So somebody will present something as a people problem. I can't, these guys don't listen and they don't do what I tell them to do. And man, our turnover is really bad. It's just not working. And then we start looking at things like not just employee productivity data, but we'll also look at employee cost. And we'll start to see like, oh, well, did you realize that you pay 15% less on wages than the operators that are around your market? And so it's like, okay, maybe I don't have a people problem. Maybe I'm just not able to get the right people, right? So right people, right seat. it's this idea of having regular conversation. So that's the people issue, that sometimes might be a numbers issue versus a people issue. In some cases, they'll say it's a numbers issue, and then we'll be like, well, you've made a decision to expand by adding, becoming a manufacturer's rep, basically, and distributing equipment. So when you distribute equipment, you don't make the same margins as when you rent equipment. So you have to recognize that's going to have an impact on some of the percentages that you like to benchmark. So we teach them about that, what that means. And my personal thing, on a personal note, if you're going to learn one thing on numbers, the gross margin pile of money, gross profit or gross margin pile of money, you're creating a mountain of money. Just think of it as a mountain of money. And don't think about percentages. What do I need to do to make that gross profit margin bigger and bigger and bigger? Now, your variable expenses, or your fixed expenses, are something that is how you have to cover those costs to figure out what your profit is. But at the end of the day, you may be able to grow your gross profit mountain by adding an equipment distributorship, whether it's a handheld tool type of dealer activity like Honda generators or something like that. All those things contribute to the gross profit mountain of money. And then, it just helps with you being able to expand and grow your business and not be too concerned with percentages.
Dan, after you hosted me on your Peer Talk podcast, you introduced me to the E-Myth, which breaks down a few key types of being the technician, the manager, and the entrepreneur. In rental specifically, where do you see most owners stuck along that matrix?
Yeah.
And what's the escape plan for each stage? And was there a moment where that there was an owner who finally shifted from working in the business to working on the business, and this process of the E-Myth that you explained?
That is great. That's a great question. And by the way, shout out to E-Myth, because it's an old old thoughts, school of thought that I think more people need to learn from. And it's really understanding your behavior and who you are as a person. Most people who are good mechanics feel like they should have a mechanic shop because, well, shoot, I just know I can run a mechanic shop. I know it better than anything. So they leave their job and they go from being a mechanic into being a mechanic shop owner. Well, guess what? When you're an owner, you're not a mechanic anymore.
Different rules, yeah.
So now all of a sudden you have to think about strategy, growth, how to communicate who you are differently from others. You have to think about your ability to manage your human resources, your people. You have to think about processes and systems, and as none of which have anything to do with being a mechanic. And that's really where we are in the rental industry. So whether it's the higher stores that are down in Australia or in the U.S. with rental companies or event rental in the U.S., you probably got into it because you like doing that, right? You like doing it. And as an operator, you're feeling good. So you come out of it and now you're growing. And the two places that we see people get stuck is strategy. So being able to have the vision 1 year, 3 year, 5 year to grow your business. What do you want it to look like? That we see a lot of owners who can't get to that. And then the second part is the financial side. So I know that, from an operation side, they could fix that car, they could fix, the equipment, get that back out. They can look at a used piece of equipment, judge it, and bring it into their fleet, all those types of things. But at the end of the day, where a lot of them get hung up is strategy for growth and financial controls.
You said something to me that you've also repeated a few times, is that opening a second location is nowhere near as hard as surviving your third. Yeah. Why is there this huge jump, you believe, from 2 to 3 that changes the game so dramatically for especially rental businesses?
Absolutely. I mean, again, that goes back to even the E-Myth book, E-Myth Revisited. It's this idea of if I can run around and spin those plates at my one location, I probably can run around and spin those plates at a second location and then hurry back to the first location and spin those plates again. And when you get to a third location, now you've got a lot of plates to spin, Like, you remember that, the spinning of the plates and on the thing. And so what happens at that point is it's just not going to work, and you'll start to fall off and fail in different areas. So the only way to get past that is to have systems in place to spin those plates for you, if there's an easy way to say that. But essentially, what do I have to plan for myself to be absent from the business? We had a great example of this where an owner had a nice little office. He made this office. It was so great. You walk in and it had all his trinkets and all his stuff. And he would write estimates and do quotes and things like that from that office. And he opened a second store, and he was going to a third store. And what I did, and I was probably in my 30s at the time. I'm like, we need to take your office away. So we took his office away from him. And so now all of a sudden he's in a truck. So he's in a pickup going store to store. And that was it. I'm like, you're not going back to your office. You're not going to work on what is needed in that space. I need you up here looking down on these 3. And man, it made all the difference. He ended up with 8 locations. And to this day, he's like, thank you so much for taking away my office. So that was pretty fun.
Dan, you talked about the left-handed layup and the discomfort of letting go. What's one control point or a really key area that you see owners refuse to let go of that caps their growth?
So to me, the final stage, this is good. I'm glad you asked this question, because if, let's say I have 10 minutes before I die and I have to share one last tidbit on rental. The final stage for an owner is fleet management. So the ability to understand the time utilization on your categories of assets, your dollar utilization on your original asset cost that you paid for that asset, and then how to refresh and change your fleet over time. That has to be transferred. You cannot do that as an owner forever. And that is always the last bit that gets transferred. And by the way, if you walk into an independent rental operation and you see an operator, an owner who says, well, that's Jim over there and he does the fleet management, you got to high five him, because that's really the game changer. It's when you take an employee and have them identify what they're going to spend at the show, what they're going to, have that employee be that feel for your business. You can go do other things. So you got financial freedom and personal freedom.
You've described to me that your heart will always be with independent rental operators because they're cut from a different cloth.
Yep.
What is that cloth, and what is that mindset that they hold that you love so much?
Oh, it's like me. I tried different things. I probably never did the same thing for more than 3 years for my first 12 years of business life. And I see a lot of that in an independent owner. They have had an entrepreneurial moment that caused them to become independent, or they're taking over from their parents. And it's the same thing. It's like at some point, it's got to click for you. You have to say, oh, I get this. Now I understand. This is now my vision going forward, or this is, I'm going to implement this vision that's been given to me, whatever it might be. But ultimately, it's so unique versus big business. Big business is great, and people have great careers, and in their own business sense, they're having an entrepreneurial moment and working in their departments. But ultimately, to be a small business owner, I think the ultimate is kind of a cool place to be.
It's something that myself and Dad have spoken about as well, obviously owning our own rental business, is that potentially people in a corporate environment, they might do 99% of the things and make 99% of the decisions we do.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of ownership and a lot of pressure and a lot of responsibility, even in being, a PAYG employee.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, that last 1%.
Yeah.
That we have to do, the weekends, the late nights, and that last bit of accountability, it's different for independents.
That's a great point. And I missed that, but yes, you're right. I would say that extra effort, that for me, it's waking up at 5, 6 in the morning. And whatever it is, I always have some idea pop into my head at 5 and 6 in the morning. Like that's where my work gets done, like early in the morning. So I think that happens to every business owner that, some would call it worry, but I don't think it's worry. I think it's, it's that little inch that says, what do I want to do to make our situation a little better?
Well, they say the paranoid survive. So, Dad, peer groups are investing heavily in benchmarking and AI, not for more data for more data's sake, but to make better decisions and to really reveal what's behind the curtain for business owners. How do you think leaders should use these metrics to drive action in their business?
I think first off, it has to be habitual. So from the start, you can't just say like, "Hey, let's sit down and do some AI," right? So for me, there's this book out called Atomic Habits, which is, at least start, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I joke with my son because I do 25 push-ups every morning. Well, it doesn't make me stronger. It's a thing in my head that gets my blood flowing. But the fact that, I do it every day is rhythmic. And with AI, it's the same thing. You need to dig in, look at what's there. I joined an AI community, and I'm telling you, again, peer groups, right? So I joined an AI community, and you just learn very rapidly from other people's shared successes and shared experiences. And I think if, the one question every independent owner should think in their head at some point when they're having a meeting with their key staff is there any way AI can enhance this particular issue or topic? Excellent. So when it goes to, looking at additional prospecting of new customers, when it goes back to looking at your existing customers, are you looking at ways that AI might be able to help you with that? Are you looking at, helping to analyze your business deeper? And that was a big thing for us. We started about a year and a half ago to really use AI when it comes to benchmarking and say, like, benchmarking is not enough. We want what AI has to offer when it comes to, activity behind my benchmark. So if you're telling me that I have 3 to 4 weak spots on my balance sheet or my income statement, I need to know what you would recommend from an activity perspective. And so we created the benchmark report, which goes out to every member as they request. It's almost like a report card from us. And it's great because we can do 150, 200 businesses and check them and make sure that's accurate. But it's been helpful to us. And we see it being implemented in rental all over the place, especially with the management software. Those companies have really jumped on it. Companies like Quipley and Point of Rental and some of the different software providers in the US and globally.
And going back to your comment of the 25 push-ups, it's an upward spiral. And like you said, starting is the biggest step. And one good habit leads to another good habit and gets you along the process and kind of in success momentum. And it's something that Achille Tori explained to me today when discussing AI was take a photo of the ingredients in your fridge. Get comfortable using it, and that will naturally flow like the 25 push-ups into another good habit.
Absolutely. And by the way, I saw his keynote speak at the Quipley Rental Roundtable, and he was amazing, and he brought that up at that point, and I've totally taken what he said to heart regarding that, because it's exactly that. Like, you don't really know what you're eating, but if you take a picture of the ingredients on the item that you're pulling out, all of a sudden you start to get smart about like making certain choices. And I think the same thing goes for a business owner.
Dan, this one might come a bit out of left field for you, an unexpected question. You're heavily involved in music and the arts, and you spend a lot of time at concerts.
Yes.
What's one thing that music has taught you about your life leadership and what you want to do that business never could?
Interesting. Well, I will say from purely an enjoyment standpoint, music has definitely touched my soul from being a little child all the way through. And I did not grow up in a musical family, but the minute I found a guitar, which wasn't until I was like 40, then I really got into it. And my son obviously heard me playing around on the guitar, and he went on to be very musical. So first off, just having music around us all the time has been soothing. It helps with so many. It's almost like a therapeutic thing for me. But I would also say, like, again, community. People. So it's not just listening to the music, and people know me. I have to go to the festival, right? So I'm not just listening to a record. I have to go see music live, be with people, enjoy the community of people, be able to share our own experiences, because you're going to talk. I've been to concerts by myself where I go to a festival, and you end up talking to people and have a great time. So I was actually just at one where a gentleman next to me was on his own from New Zealand. So we got to catch up, and I got to learn all about New Zealand with him.
Well, it all goes back to shared experience, right?
Yep, absolutely.
So, Dan, let's land and leave something for the independent rental owners that are listening.
Yep.
What's one leadership move, business move, tip, trick, habit that they could take on this month that will still matter for them in 5 years' time?
Well, I would say probably my biggest challenge, which I would actually put out there to everyone and challenge them, is the ability to create a human organization, a people place. It is not easy, and everybody is challenged by hiring and firing. They're challenged by retention of employees. They're challenged by rewarding them appropriately, getting them through the business. But guess what? Your biggest opportunity is to have 20 employees who have 20 families and provide that type of stability for them as they raise their children, right? So it's pretty impactful. You can have a pretty big impact on your community in that way. So to me, that would be it. It would be take the time to learn the guardrails and the structure, and we talk a lot about Traction, the book, and what's inside there with regard to people systems. But that would be an example of what I would do is focus on that.
Dan, thank you for your honesty, your wisdom, and years of lifting up our industry and all of the groups within it. I really appreciate you, appreciate peer groups, and thank you for your time.
I appreciate you, and thank you for having me on.